Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of The Invisible Men. Hey, Nike, how are you?
Hi, Ian. I am wonderful, and I'm just so excited for our new guest because he represents and leads an institution that I absolutely love.
Wow, okay, there you go, the Mercatus Center. Yes. Ben Klutsey. How are you, Ben?
I'm well. I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're so excited. You are still relatively new executive director of the Mercatus Center. You've been there for a while, but you were appointed, elected to the top role, which is fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Mercatus is all about advancing ideas for a free society, which I love.
Absolutely.
Which I love. So, can't
Absolutely.
wait to get into it. Can't wait to
hmm
get into your film,
hmm
Undivide Us. Can't wait to get into the Pluralist Lab. Like all the things that you're doing
hmm
to figure out ways to bring our country together, to at least make us less divided. But let's start. Let's start early because you have an interesting background that
Yep.
I'm sure will be of great interest to our audience. So, tell us a little bit about growing up and when you first realized that skin color, that race, had some meaning.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. I was born and raised in Ghana, West Africa, and I had a what one might call a regular upper middle class, life. And obviously, it's all relative, but given my environment, that's probably how I would categorize it. Grew up with wonderful, wonderful parents, and had three siblings, so there are four of us. But my father is an entrepreneur, and growing up, he always talked about entrepreneurship and taught me and my brother and my sisters to work extremely hard because that's just the kind of person that he is. Would wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and he is deep into his documents and reading stuff, and you get ready and go over to the office. But he grew up extremely poor. He was the first of six brothers. Very had a very hard time making ends meet. He had to drop out of high school because his family just couldn't afford the basic necessities. So his goal was to struggle. He'd always been really good at math, and I think at some point he used to tutor his friends for some cash. So he did everything to really make ends meet. He peddled newspapers on the streets and did all of that. But he at one point got a job as a kind of an assistant at the port. Where I grew up was right along the ocean, and we had a wonderful harbor, and so you could get a job as an assistant at the harbor, helping firms that were exporting goods and so on. And there was an Italian expat who lived in Ghana at the time, who took a liking to my dad and basically gave him a job to work as his personal assistant. And so he worked for him, and Carlo, that was his name, was a timber guy. He worked in the timber industry, and Ghana is well known for its exports. Three major ones are gold, cocoa, and timber. And so timber was a pretty popular industry. So he said to my dad, "Hey, Kofi, that's my dad's name. Kofi, you seem like a really, really smart guy and very entrepreneurial. My business is really interesting. I could share with you how it works, and figure out if you like it or not. You can do whatever it is that you want to do with it." To cut the long story short, my dad said, "Absolutely, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and this sounds like a great opportunity for me." He learned the business. My father built a factory, employed hundreds of people, and that was it. Really, he was just that hard working, keep pushing kind of person. And Carlo was a great mentor of his. As kids, we would go and visit him at his house. He had made Ghana his home.
Hmm.
And it was wonderful until, Ghana, we got independence in 1957. We, Kwame Nkrumah, who was a freedom fighter, an amazing, charismatic leader who fought for independence for Ghana, ended up moving the country more towards socialism. And that created some challenges because some of his political opponents found themselves in jail. And he made a lot of enemies out of that. And so, as the country moved more and more towards socialism, it sowed the seeds for a coup, a military coup. So, in the mid 1960s, a coup happened where Kwame Nkrumah was kicked out. But that example created successive coups because everyone, whenever they feel like, oh, I don't like the system,
Right.
they come
Just
in and
overturn
then
it. You just overthrow
exactly,
it. Right.
exactly. And one of the coups in 1979 by Jerry John Rawlings was really a Marxist revolution. So someone like my dad, who was an entrepreneur, was a target, and he almost lost everything. They nearly threw him in jail. He was harassed a lot. They would grab him and spit in his face and push him around.
And
They
how old
took.
were you at this time?
I was really little. I may have been about 2 or 3 years old. So there's a lot of this that I don't remember,
Yeah.
but the stories are in the water, in the family. So you hear it a lot. So anyway, my dad, so he went through a lot, and he always would say, look, the government, what it does is just take away a lot. And my dad is someone, I think of him as a sort of a natural classical liberal. He's more about freedom than anything else. Understands the value of entrepreneurship in fostering prosperity. He wouldn't use these terms, but he had internalized it in a way that was so real. And so your question was how I discovered race. My father did show us, movies like Mandela, which I think came out in 1987 by Danny Glover. And it talked about what Nelson Mandela went through in apartheid South Africa. I also watched Roots as a kid. And so I saw all 7 parts, if I recall it correctly. And it was wild watching Roots and Mandela and all these movies as a kid, but it seemed so distant. I knew that there's a world in which blacks are not welcome and are treated very badly, but it seemed so distant because growing up, all I saw were, black leaders, black fathers, black entrepreneurs like my dad, doing well, black politics. I mean, yeah, that was it. I mean,
Well, yeah, and also presumably Carlo white?
yes, he
Right.
was.
So you also had a positive relationship with
Right,
with a white person in your life. Interesting. Okay.
exactly. But I was aware of this thing, but it didn't quite resonate, because it seemed so distant until I went to Europe for the very first time. And before we started, Ian, you and I were talking about this experience a little bit, but I think I was about 11 years old when I went to Germany, a small town called Emden in the northern part of Germany, close to the Dutch-German border. And on the first day that we arrived, my siblings and I get excited because in the house that we lived across the street was a really wonderful playground, and we could hear the kids running around and screaming and having so much fun. And we thought it was just a good idea to get outside and participate in all these fun activities, with the seesaws and the swings and everything else going on. So we get there, and up just about 6, 7 feet before, at the edge of the playground, all these kids stopped. So German kids and mostly their moms on the playground, and they stopped. They stopped. They were screaming and shouting and crying and pointing at us and yelling the N word multiple times. And we were just shocked. We didn't know what was going on. My brother, my two sisters, and it was quite interesting, sad because it was the very first time that I think my siblings and I felt unwelcome, and that we did not belong. And we did a bit of a tour. We went to Germany, and then we went to the UK, went to London. But throughout those several weeks traveling, it's something that I kept thinking about. Do we belong? Do we belong? So I think that was sort of the very first time that I experienced this this major concept of race. But
Yeah.
prior to that, it just seemed so distant to me.
Do you think that growing up, because it's quite striking, because in similar, when I was, for the part of my life of which I was in Jamaica, West Indies, it was it was quite something because all of the major people around were black.
Yeah.
And I've shared this with Nike before. Even my dad, when he grew up in Jamaica, he was a man. He was a man. It wasn't until he came to the United States that he was told he's a black man.
Oh yeah.
But do you think that growing up where you saw all these black leaders was the norm, that created kind of a mental armor for you, that even what you encountered in Germany, it had an effect, obviously, but you had some, I don't know, power. You had some resistance to really feeling that they were putting you in your place because you had a sense of your own identity at that point, do you think?
Absolutely. And my brother and I talk about this a lot, that growing up the way that we did gives you a sense of, I want to call it rootedness, in who you are, in a way that is just hard to lose. Now, I know that not everyone is like us, my brother and I, or you, Ian, or Nike. Did I say that right? Nike. But there are people who feel differently. But I have to say, for me, that's, what gave me a sense of rootedness. And it's really never been shaken, regardless of all that I've seen. And I've lived in the US for, over 25, 26 years or so. I haven't experienced anything like what I experienced in Germany.
Wow.
My introduction to America was Appleton, Wisconsin, and it was the most welcoming place I'd ever been. It just, I had a wonderful experience, and that's how it's been since then. So, yeah, it's hard to think differently or behave differently if these have been your experiences. Now, obviously, I know what's happening in the news, and I hear this, and so I understand. But
Yeah, Ben, just two observations. I love your introduction. One, as you talked about the Italian gentleman that really mentored your dad, I think about the narrative of the colonizer and no good Europeans making trouble extracting resources from Africa. And frankly, it's nice to hear that, from at a very personal level, that there was a different reality, at least in this case. And that's good. Probably the other, as you were talking about your dad, maybe the same for you, Ian, but anytime I hear those entrepreneurial stories in a place like Ghana, I think about Dr. Sol's reference to the merchant class, right? That
Mhm.
merchant class, that entrepreneurial class, one, so important to society, but also kind of the first group that gets attacked when, as you said, Marxism, socialism begins to take hold. It's the merchant class that takes the brunt of the abuse. Um, and just my last observation is just, yeah, the reference you just made to Germany versus Wisconsin. I think so often people are, America is the most racist country in the world. I can't wait to leave. I'm burning my passport. And then, for all of us, you hear dozens of stories of people's experiences in other countries being
Yeah.
far more racist.
Yeah, yeah, and also I saw my dad. He had an international business. He exported across the world, and I saw him negotiate with people from all walks of life. Germans, Cubans, Italians, and he operated as an equal to all of these people who wanted his business, and he wanted their business. Mutually beneficial exchanges, as happens in markets. And he sort of gave me a, a good insight about what it's like to be a working man. He'd have me get on the other side of the call to listen to how he was negotiating things, and
Oh, wow.
that's what I experienced growing up. So it's hard to think that I'm less than, just because some crazy people are behaving it. Now, I do not want to trivialize racist experiences that others have had,
Of
but
course.
and I know we don't. Yeah, we're not trying to do that. But predominantly, there are a lot of people like us, you know, and I think it's important that we're highlighting this.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's actually a video of a Black American woman who left the United States because she was so horrible, and so she moved to Ghana. Have you seen this?
No, I have not.
I saw the headline. I didn't click it. I literally saw like the snapshot of it.
So she's made
Ready
this
to come back, right?
she's made this video. I gotta come back. It's so terrible. It's this. It's that. It's BS. They want my stuff, and this. It's just very funny. So, but it's so healthy your perspective because how do you? So okay. So you've been in the United States now, and so where did you end up going to school?
I went to a small liberal arts college in Appleton, Wisconsin called
Okay.
Lawrence. Yeah, Lawrence University. Yep.
All right. Okay. All right. So, have you felt that your perspective was, as it relates to race relations, do you feel it's been challenged, particularly in the Black community? Have you found that people are receptive to how you think about the world, given how you were raised in Ghana?
Yeah, I mean, I think that George Floyd, right, was a huge moment. And this sort of narrative that I have was frequently challenged. Right? It was, yeah, people were like, you're lucky, or just different. Yours is rare, and I heard that a lot. I heard that a lot. And I know people experience things differently, but also we all have different lenses through which we look at the world.
Yep. Sure.
And sometimes the way that you might perceive something will be different from the way that someone else does. And I think sometimes that's what's going on here. But yeah, it's been challenged. But I really stand my ground, and I think that America does really well, and better than people are willing to give it credit. We are increasingly, Yasha Monk at Johns Hopkins wrote a book called the Great Experiment.
Yeah.
And one of the points that he makes is that for the very first time in world history, we're seeing large, growing, multi-ethnic, multi-ideological democracies. And America is the number one example of this, but you see this happening in Europe as well, with, let's say, Germany with Syrian refugees and so on. And people are kind of grappling with how to handle difference. But I think America deals with this a lot because of the number of people that it welcomes, on its shores. Now, obviously, Canada also does an amazing job. I think I don't recall the data off the top of my head, but probably it takes in more immigrants than most. So yeah, I think that we are grappling. We are more aware of this, but I think we do a pretty good job.
Got it. So let's fast forward to Mercatus, because I definitely want to get to Undivide Us as well.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about Mercatus. I know you've been there for a little while, but again, you've recently become the executive director. What is Mercatus? What's the foundation upon it's built, and what are you now seeking to achieve as its executive director?
Yeah, well, we are a university-based research center. We are located within George Mason University. Mercatus is Latin for markets, and so it already gives you the idea of what we're about. But as as you mentioned earlier on, we want to advance ideas for a free society, because a robust society is built on freedom. And over the years, and now increasingly, while we produce a lot of great research on all kinds of policy issues or economic issues, we also train a lot of students who have gone through our programs all the way from the undergraduate level to the PhD level. And the way that I think about what we do, and I think we do this very, very well, is to train and equip classical liberal change makers. The kinds of people who are thinking about freedom in a very robust way. When you think about classical liberalism, the economist Emily Chamley Wright, who is the head of the Institute for Humane Studies, says there are four corners of liberalism. The first corner is economic liberalism. That is the idea of Adam Smith that we have to engage in mutually beneficial exchanges, and that's how human flourishing
Right,
emerges.
voluntary,
Exactly.
mutually beneficial exchange.
Exchanges, exactly. That's economic liberalism. There is political liberalism, the freedom to participate and engage in a process for self-governing equals. That's really important. The third is, cultural or civic liberalism, that we can form our associations, we can be part of different assemblies, we can practice our faiths, we can practice our cultures in the ways that we see fit. That's important. And then finally, intellectual liberalism or epistemic liberalism, freedom of thought, of expression. That open inquiry is important in a free society. So when we talk about classical liberalism and wanting to basically train and equip classical liberal change makers, we want people who are thinking about freedom across all these four corners and want to advance these ideas across different spheres. So,
Wow, and these are obviously universal themes, right?
yes. Absolutely.
Got it. So talk to us then about how you're tackling, because you've clearly made a concerted effort to try and applying these values and these virtues to some of the most divisive issues facing our country. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in 2019, going on to 2020, we started to think a lot about polarization, the extent to which Americans are divided. And while we love markets, the marketplace for goods and services, it's wonderful. we think that the marketplace of ideas is even more important. Where we can exchange ideas, that's where we improve upon our knowledge, we gain new insights, and that's how innovation happens. So if the marketplace of ideas is oriented towards conflict and discord, we're not going to be successful. And so we had to figure out how we could till the soil, how we could help reorient it towards open inquiry, civil discourse, and that kind of thing. And so that began an experiment. The way I think about our pluralism program, I think of it as an experiment, and it turned out better than I expected. I was fortunate to bump into Christy Kendall, who's a filmmaker, really amazing filmmaker, who really brought this whole Undividers project together. But as she also really cares about this issue, and she had read a book by Tony Woodleaf called I, Citizen. And Tony challenged the narrative that, Americans may not be as divided as one might think. Elites are currently divided, whether you're looking at Congress, you're looking at academia, you're looking at all these elite spaces. There seem to be some strong divisions there. But when it comes to, folks who are not, in these spaces, are they really as divided? Yep. So as I was working with students a lot, ran something called the Pluralist Lab, where we brought students from different parts of the country, different perspectives, having difficult conversations on education, immigration, all these things. And I was also learning that when you give students a chance, they actually can engage. Pluralism is the idea that we can coexist and live together peacefully amidst deep divides and differences. And I see these students coexisting peacefully even when they are engaging across their differences. Mm-hmm. And so something seemed interesting there in that challenge from Tony. And so Christy said, why don't we test this out? Can we just get on the road and figure this out? I mean, I've never been involved in a film or anything like that. But we went across the country, went to Phoenix, Atlanta, Pittsburgh. We brought, regular Americans together. And it was quite an experience where we talked about everything from, the Second Amendment to, pro-choice, pro-life, to education, immigration, all of the, hot button issues. There's a particular part of the film where the question about the Second Amendment comes up, and the way that we ask the questions, we're not saying, hey, you, John, what do you defend this position you have, and Tom, we do something called the triadic elimination, which is basically like reflective listening. So if we say that which one of these has the most impact on human happiness, is it cats, dogs, or both, right? And so if you're a cat person, you have the orange petal. If you're a dog person, you have the purple petal. If you are both or in between, you have the pink petal. And I would say, hey, Tom, I notice you're a dog person. Why do you think John might be a cat person? And then Tom would be like, well, maybe he's a bit more introverted and he likes things simple, and, cats move gracefully and so on. It's like, hey, John, what did Tom get right? Well, he got like 70% right. But the other part that I might add is that, I kind of grew up with cats, so I'm used to them. I love them. Oh, interesting. Same thing, right? John, what do you think the other person thinks about, dogs and why and so on? So you go through that process. So with guns, we say, why do you think that, Celicia might be against guns, right? And so he says a couple of things and kind of nails it. Not 100%, but his guesses were correct. And it takes the lady aback a little bit. Like, oh, okay. He can empathize, he can get into my shoes, even though he disagrees with me, right? And I think that's what we were trying to illustrate.
The ability to own guns does more harm than good. That's going to be on the orange side, on the left. Or the ability to own guns does more good than harm on the right side. Ready, set, go. Let's see. So we got 4 of you actually they do more harm than good. and one of you is on the side that they do more good. So Matt, let's start with you.
The reason why I'm so for guns is...
Hold on about that. I don't want to know that yet.
Okay.
Why do you think Celicia is a gun hater? Celicia, I want you to hold a blank face, and I want you to hear what he's going to tell you. Why do you think Celicia?
You grew up with a lot of gun violence in your life. Maybe you lost people that were close to you to firearms.
So I grew up in Northview Heights. I grew up in what we call in the city of Pittsburgh a project neighborhood. It was rough. Some made it out, some didn't.
Ben, it's between the film and the work at the center that you've done for so many years, do you have kind of a generalized image of what kind of an individual is more open to the other side's perspective? And alternatively, give us some perspective. It's gross generalizations, but what kind of individual is less open to the other side, whether that's ethnic, racial, religious, gender? What is there a profile that you've seen in your many years of supporting open dialogue and discussion?
It's an interesting question. I would say it's actually a small percentage. When you look across the board, the most polarized folks, the percentage is about 19%. That's 8 on either side, on the left and on the right, who say, I cannot stand anyone who sees the world differently, right? So it's a very, very small percentage of people. And those are people that, they are, some scholars call them political hobbyists. So they are in their echo chambers 24/7.
Yeah, and I wonder if those people are simply projecting in that they actually don't necessarily even have confidence in their own ideas. It's better just to stay within your own posse, right, than actually have your ideas challenged.
Yeah. And so that's what I would say. But I think most Americans can engage across differences. It doesn't mean that they're walking away swapping like, oh, okay, now I see the world the way you do it. I agree with you 100%. No, that is not the case. But they walk away seeing you a little bit differently. Because what's happening actually is that we're overestimating how extreme the other side is. And by coming together and having these conversations within close proximity, looking at each other face to face, we realize, oh, wait a second. When we say to each other, look, put your cell phones away, they're a distraction. Look at each other when you're having a conversation and make sure you use their names when you're speaking to them because it humanizes them. I mean, these things make a huge difference. And then we go through certain principles for the dialogue. And we can go into that if you're interested. But yeah, and and these are things that we're taught to do growing up. And I think they're very effective. But what's happened is that we actually are spending a lot more time with people who see the world the way we do. And it's unintentional because we just enjoy being around our people, right? And technology allows us to do that. You're looking for a home in a particular location with certain features and certain things in the environment. You're more likely to be around people who like all of those things. You're more likely to see the world similarly. And so you're with them all of the time. And what happens is that when you're spending time with people who agree with you on everything, you tend to swap your more benign views for more extreme views. And it could be the most trivial thing from the altitude of Colorado to how cold it is in a particular room or whatever. We can egg each other on in a way that our views become a bit more stronger than they previously were.
Got it. So what would you say right now is the biggest issue that our country is divided on? That you feel optimism that we can actually address?
Well, the biggest issue that we are divided on is if you wear a red jersey and I wear a blue jersey. I mean, negative attitudes towards inter-party marriages is much higher than interfaith, interracial, and all these other things.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. I mean, from the 1970s, we've seen a 50% decline in inter-party marriages.
Wow.
Yeah,
and an increase in interracial marriages.
Yeah.
And an
Yeah.
increase in interreligious matter. That's
Yes.
fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, you'll still find the holdouts, right? But in the 1950s, if you asked Americans about, whether they agree with interracial marriage, the numbers are like, you know, uh, they disagreed, right? Only maybe 5% of the population agreed, or 10. But now it's like 98% and beyond, and people, they don't care. But inter-party marriages, um, so that's the big issue. That's the
Amazing.
big issue. We have actually gotten closer on some issue. I mean, so political scientists distinguish between political polarization and affective polarization. And political polarization is the ideological distance between two parties. So, pro-life, pro-choice. And we kind of know where people are, and, they're not budging, or pro-Second Amendment, let's have some gun control. We know where they are. Over about 40, 50 years, people haven't changed that much. In fact, if anything at all, people have gotten a bit closer to get, on certain issues like the environment and so on. What has changed is just how we feel about each other. It's no longer that I disagree with you and, you're fine. I've got crazy uncles who see the world the way that you do, and that's okay. But I disagree with you, and your views are a threat to my existence.
Right. You're a bad
You're a
person.
bad person, yeah, and you're dangerous. And that's what we've got to address. Now, on the plus side, you're asking me what I see as hopeful, is that we still agree on a lot of values: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all the things that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights. You'll find Americans agreeing on 90%, at worst 80 or 70%. And I think that is room, and that is an opportunity for us to connect and be more integrated.
Right.
That's
Right.
an optimistic perspective. I really appreciate that. Ben, I wanted to move us to what we call the speed round, where I'm going to present to you different individuals, one on each side, ask you to pick one, and then tell our audience why you resonate with that individual. So we'll start with Malcolm or Martin.
And I cannot do both.
Well, our audience would be disappointed if you did both.
I would say Martin.
And why?
And Martin Luther King, the incredible power it takes to not respond when someone offends you, when someone hurts you, when someone gets physical towards you. It takes incredible power to do that. There's a wonderful book by Aurelian Krayutsu called Why Not Moderation? And he talks about moderation in the context of not a wishy-washy virtue, but really a sense of temperance. Someone who is almost stoic in querying, in questioning, and not just reacting or being reactive. And he highlights Martin Luther King as someone who he spoke the truth to power, but he was so balanced and moderated in the way that he engaged, and I really love that about him.
Excellent. My next two, I actually had written down before you shared, very intimate details about how they both impacted your family. I'm still going to ask. So, Rollins or Nkrumah?
I would say Rawlings, because Rawlings showed that one could change. Rawlings came in as a Marxist military leader. He realized that the ideas were not working. Ghana had a crazy famine in 1983. The entire country was starving. People like my parents had to go to neighboring countries to get food. And then he said, look, his advisors came to him, showed him some charts. They started to talk to him about, this economic stuff, prices and demand and supply and all that stuff. He's like, this thing seems interesting. Let's try it. They brought in the World Bank and IMF, and they did something called the structural adjustment programs. They liberalized markets, privatized a lot of industries. I mean, at the height of socialism, the country owned over 400 companies, from fisheries to mango processing, that the government just had no business and had no knowledge of how to run those things. So all those things were privatized. He moved Ghana towards democracy. He ran for election twice. He won twice, and he left office. So, Rawlings shows that people can change. You can update your priors. You can, take in new information and say, we ought to go in a different direction.
Excellent. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for answering that one. Mm-hmm. So, Tyler Cohen or Milton Friedman?
I think that Tyler would forgive me for not picking him because he's a much more humble guy. I'd say Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman was a powerful public intellectual, a great economist who won the Nobel Prize, and a great communicator of ideas. And he was influential in public policy because it's because of him that we no longer have the draft, right? He made the economic case, but he made the case also for why free markets are so important, so critical for advancing human flourishing. And I'm definitely if you gave me both, I'd definitely go for Milton Friedman. But I'm a huge Tyler Cowen fan. He's a colleague, and he's become a mentor of mine, and he's wonderful.
He truly is. And for our audience, anyone that doesn't listen to Tyler's podcast, that's produced and distributed by the Mercatus Center, you're missing out.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite out of so many, and it's one of many that the Mercatus Center delivers. So the last one for our speed round: Elon Musk or Steve Jobs?
That's a hard one. Now, I will pick Steve Jobs because, I have an iPhone and I've had one for years and years, and I've enjoyed the product a lot. Just a phenomenal innovator, and Elon Musk is still doing things, right? So we're yet to see where he ends up. But if you gave me the two, I'd pick Steve Jobs.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, Ben, we're coming almost to the end. I feel compelled to ask you one question, though, which is, given everything that you've seen in the United States, given all the experience you have from around the world, do you ever consider going back to Ghana to help continue to lead the country towards, a greater democratic republic where free markets are, certainly still being developed, and as you just said, I'm there often. I try to go once or twice each year, but I would say they're more talented people than myself who are there on the ground, who know the issues a lot more intimately than I do, having been so closer to the issues. I still have friends there. We talk. It's a wonderful country, a country I certainly love, and I think that we've got so much going for us, and I'm very hopeful about the country. But there's great talent there, and because of the talent, I think that we're going to do wonderful things in Ghana. Wow! So as we have talked about, when Nike and I started this, The Invisible Men documentary and then video podcast, it was all oriented around this idea that there's just great work by gentlemen just like yourself that unfortunately is euphemistically invisible. particularly to young black men growing up in our country. And we like to end every episode asking our guest if you had the opportunity to speak to, in this case, a young man, Daryl, who's a 16-year-old black kid living in forgotten USA, single mom, who's hearing all the messages, about George Floyd, and that's every black man, and not knowing what his prospects are, and frankly, probably never ever hearing of Ben Klutsey. What would you say to Daryl as he thinks about his future in America? He's 16, but he's not really sure he has a shot.
It's a great question, but I can imagine going so many different directions, and I want to avoid making so many assumptions. But I'd say to him what my father said to me when I was coming to this country. I was 18 years old, and he said to me, when you go there, obviously we're not there, find someone who is wise. I don't know that my dad probably figured that I knew who a wise person, looks like, sounds like. But he said, find a wise person and listen to them, and have a mentor who can help you navigate the world. There's nothing that if you put your mind to, you can't do. There's nothing that if you want to learn, you will not know. He said that all of the time. And that what it is that you are doing, what you've put your mind to doing, is way more important than what others are saying or doing around you. So be focused on what's ahead, the kinds of things that you want to accomplish, and you're going to do great things. You have to read as much as you can. Just reading in and of itself puts you miles and miles and miles ahead of of others, and it will take you far in where you want to go. I would say this to Daryl.
All right. Strong advice. Ben, thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you for the wisdom that you have shared. I really do. I have an idea maybe for a future episode. We bring your dad on, and we talk to both of you about what you've learned from each other.
Yeah.
In this mutual journey.
Well, thank you. This has been a great conversation, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about some of the work that I've done and talk about Mercatus and my dad as well. Obviously, like I said, I'm your typical guy whose dad is his hero, because he certainly is my hero, and I know my brother would say the same thing too. That he gave us everything. He and my mom both gave us everything that we have now, and so I owe so much to that man.
Yes. Wow. Well, Nike, any parting words that you'd like to share?
Well, just to, that man who got up at 4:30 every morning and did his papers and was entrepreneurial. What a magnificent world we live in, that his son, is now the executive director of such an important center, such an important producer of product and insights and content that helps make America America. And to think that, that's someone from what's that, 3,000 miles from where you were born. It's just such a magnificent example of what America represents and what your dad represents, just in terms of the human spirit. Really just so proud to connect with you, and grateful for your father.
Thank you for saying that. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Well, thank you to our listeners for watching another episode of The Invisible Men. If you'd like to see other episodes, you can go to www.invisible.men. And we're also wherever podcasts, or wherever you get your other podcasts, on Spotify, Apple, So with that, gentlemen, Ben, thank you very much. Nike, great to see you. And until next time.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.